Well, if you haven't heard already, the UFC is heading to Des Moines, Des Moines. I think that the correct pronunciation is Des Moines, Iowa. May 3rd for a fight night that is going to be headlined by Cory Sandhagen versus Davison Figueiredo. But that's not all. In the co-main event, we have Reiner De Ridder versus Bo Nickal. What an outstanding matchup at middleweight. And in this video, I want to break down both of those fights. We're going to take a look at some of the bouts that are already on tap for fight night. We'll take a look at that, and then I will break down some of the more intriguing matchups on the card. Because, I mean, the minute I saw Bo Nickal versus De Ridder, I just went, this might be the first time that we're actually like super excited for a Bo Nickal fight. At least I am, right? Because Bo Nickal, he's been a guy that since he's came in the UFC, there's just been a lot of bullshit going on, man. A lot of BS to where it's like we're kind of feeding him cans and he's going out there, he's kind of underperforming and he's just not really wowing everybody, right? And then he's kind of playing these games, getting on the microphone, being like, don't boo me. Just basically becoming a nuisance, right? To where Bo Nickal was basically kind of shooting himself in the foot at every corner that he could, right? Which was kind of, creating a little bit of an issue. And then now we have him versus Reiner De Ridder, who comes over from ONE FC, and he's been on a roll, right? He goes in there against Gerald Mearshard. It was looking kind of rough, but he ultimately found a way to get the job done. And then he just steamrolls through Kevin Holland and submits him in the very first round, which you could say whatever the hell you want about Kevin Holland. To go out there and sub him in the first round, that's only been done once by a guy by the name of Khamzat Chimaev, right? So this matchup right here, outstanding. And then in the main event, I mean, Cory Sandhagen, Davison Figueiredo, I don't know that it's going to be this wow banger type of matchup, but I think it's going to be a very strategic, tactical chess match type of fight. So we will discuss all of these, but here is the bout order right now. So this is on MMA Mania because, you go to Tapology, it seems like they got everything. The UFC's website is always lacking. They basically never have the full bout order. But there's just been fights getting announced left and right. Like we have Azamat Bakoyev. He was added onto the card against Ryan Loder. Junior Tafa against Tuco Tucos. Cameron Smotherman. You get the point. But we have some very, very, very good matchups on this card here. I mean, we have the return of Miesha Tate. She's going in there against Yana Santos, to where Miesha Tate took all that time off, came back and was able to get the job done against Avila. Again, Avila not a pretty good opponent at this point. We got to see that there recently. But there are some interesting fights on this card, right? I mean, we have Santiago Ponzinibbio versus D-Rod, Jeremy Stevens coming back into the UFC. That one came out of left field against Mason Jones. So we got some fights to discuss. Let's hop into it. First one, we have Jeremy Stevens versus Mason Jones. Listen, I know people are going to be frustrated. They're going to say, look, Jeremy Stevens, he's not that guy anymore. He's getting older. He was on a skid in the UFC and things just didn't work out. He's in the PFL. He's over at BKFC. Cut the shit. When you talk about bad motherfuckers, right, what's the definition of a BMF, right? We're talking about a guy that anytime, anywhere, any place, that is an absolute savage, and damn near every fight that Jeremy Stevens is in is mayhem. It is chaos. It is entertaining to watch. This guy just went 3-0 in BKFC against Jimmy Rivera, against Eddie Alvarez. This guy, I forget who the other guy was, but the point, he stood out in a violent, bloody sport in BKFC. Jeremy Stevens has one of the most underrated highlight tapes in UFC history, in my opinion. This guy is absolutely spectacular when he is on. The problem, it's just the murderer's row that he was dealing with towards his end of, before he got let go there and parted ways with the UFC. He was in there against, absolute killers, the best guys in the division, basically over and over and over again, right? When Calvin Kattar was on his run and, what he did to Josh Emmett, Jeremy Stevens is a savage, man. He's got crazy power in his hands. He's got good leg kicks, and he's got a very game opponent in front of him in Mason Jones, because Mason, he's not particularly that great, right? I think that he's a solid fighter. He's got a fun style, right? So that's kind of what they were doing here. Look, Jeremy Stevens, an Iowa guy. They want to kind of bring a full circle moment here for a true veteran of the UFC, a guy that has put on a number of fun performances. This is going to be a banger of a fight here because Jeremy, yes, he's getting up there in age. he hasn't really shown any signs of slowing down. What he was just able to do in BKFC, I know that that's a different sport. That's a dangerous ass sport, man. That is a crazy, chaotic thing over there in BKFC, which I really enjoy watching it, by the way. But Jeremy's a savage. He's always had really fun style to watch. He's very dangerous on the feet, and he's got a guy in front of him in Mason Jones who he likes to find himself a scrap as well. So that is what we're looking at here. I think this is a banger of a matchup on this card. It's not the wow factor, right? Because Jeremy, was away, he's coming back, and it's not like he's necessarily in his prime. And then Mason, he was in Cage Warriors, the UFC, then back to Cage Warriors, and now he is getting his first crack back into the UFC here. So there's a lot for him to prove here. And I think if this stays on the feet, this is going to be a very, very fun fight. I think Jeremy Stevens has more power than Mason Jones, and I think there's a real shot that Jeremy actually KOs Mason in this fight, and that's what I'm hoping for, because I've been a fan of Jeremy Stevens throughout his career in the UFC. I mean, ever since I was basically a little kid, this dude has been in the UFC creating highlight after highlight, and whenever he wins, it is usually in a very violent fashion to where I just was calling this guy the Freddy Krueger of MMA. That's just, when Jeremy gets it done, his fights are very violent, and Mason is a very game opponent that does have some decent grappling, right? We have seen that over in Cage Warriors mainly, to where he can take you down, he does have submissions, but I don't know that he's going to be able to do that to Jeremy Stevens, right? Because while Jeremy hasn't been, in the UFC and he's been doing another sport, I still find it hard to believe that he would completely abandon the MMA. This is a longtime veteran of the sport, a very fun guy to watch. I think this is a fight of the night potential candidate right here between these two. And I lean towards Jeremy Stevens here for an early look, man. I think Jeremy Stevens can get a finish, go out on a high note. The UFC's bringing him back. It's in Iowa, in his backyard. I like this, man. I think Jeremy Stevens gets this done. This is a fun fight on the card. I'm rolling with Jeremy, man. Then we have Montel Jackson versus Daniel Marcos. I saw this fight get announced, and I was like, this is some fun matchmaking right here, because with Montel Jackson, he's one of the prospects in the division right now that he's just catching some of that steam and almost gives you these dark horse type of vibes. He's someone that when he performs, we're usually coming on after the fight, and we're like, did you see what Montel Jackson just did, man? Because it seems like every fight, this guy is improving. He's creating a new highlight for himself. And he's coming off of a very impressive finish, a quick finish rather, over Damon Blackshear, to where he landed a piston left hand down the pipe and was able to put him down. And that's what I'm talking about Montel. He's fun on the feet. He's a very, very exciting guy to watch. And he's finding himself a very good dance partner here in Daniel Marcos, who is coming off a split decision win over Adrian Yanez. And when I look at this fight here, this looks like striker's delight to me, right? Daniel Marcos has a very difficult style to deal with if you don't have an answer for the leg kicks, because Marcos will absolutely come after your legs without question. He will mix things up. He'll throw kicks to the head, to the body, to the leg, and he will try to take away your movement. But I do believe in this fight, he is going to have a little bit of an issue with the speed and the versatility in terms of the range finding against Montel Jackson. Because when I look inside the division and I say, if you're asking me who's a sniper on the feet that's a little bit of a dark horse, it's going to be Montel. I mean, the way that this guy slides in and out of range and is able to find that left hand on the chin, it is, I'm not going to say it's like Conor McGregor, but you get kind of the comparison I'm making, right? Southpaw slides back, and the way that he times that shot is absolutely perfect, man. And I love watching Montel Jackson fight. I think that he's still kind of getting into the groove here and fighting some of the better competition, because Marco's coming off a fight with Adrian. Look, Yanez at one point, he was a guy that we were looking at as, is this going to be the next kind of big thing in the division? He's got really good boxing. He's fun to watch. And I'm like, what do we have here with Yanez? And it kind of just hasn't really panned out, right? He's kind of, been hot and cold. He got, destroyed by Rob Font. And then so his stock took a little bit of a hit, but he's still a very, very game opponent. But he has showed some of those vulnerabilities to getting his legs absolutely shredded. So in this fight, if Montel has an answer for the leg kicks of Daniel Marcos, I believe that he snipes him on the feet because Montel has very, very good speed. He's very, very explosive on the feet, and the speed and the precision in which he operates, I think, is going to be a serious issue for Daniel in this fight. But the thing with Marcos, man, he's as durable as it gets. He keeps it coming, and the way that he goes after your legs, it could be a serious issue for Montel if he does not have an issue for the leg kicks. But early thoughts here, I think that Montel Jackson is able to get this one done. I don't know if he finds a finish because of, what we've seen from Marcos in terms of the durability, and he is a solid fighter, and he's very well-rounded. I just think Montel Jackson's speed's going to be an issue. I can see him finding the chin, wobbling him, battering him around a little bit. We saw Yanez started, to get going with the boxing, and I think the precision from Jackson is going to be a little bit of an issue for Daniel. But this is a really, really good matchup right here between these two guys that are on the rise in the weight class. Moving on, we have Marlon Chito Vera versus Mario Bautista. This was one of those when it got booked, and I'm like, Marlon Vera, he's a guy that he's just a game dude, man. Marlon Chito Vera is one of my favorite guys in the UFC. He's fun to watch. I like his attitude. But we got to be real about this fight here. I'm concerned for Chito Vera, right? Because he's coming off of 2 L's. The one where he basically had the undeserved title shot against Sugar Sean O'Malley, got absolutely destroyed in that fight. Sean O'Malley was, busting him up, landing knees to the... we've never seen Chito really get battered around like that, right? So that was kind of that wasn't particularly good, right? I was concerned for Chito going in there, to begin with, but I thought that maybe later on he could find something or whatever, but the speed of O'Malley, the way that he operates, it's a serious issue for everyone on the feet, right? And Vera, he just didn't mix anything up, right? He just basically tried to stand in there for 25 minutes and have a kickboxing fight with Sean O'Malley. And anyone at bantamweight that's probably going to do that, straight kickboxing, I don't know if you beat O'Malley, right? So I don't know, what was a very underwhelming performance, got battered around. Then he goes out there against Davis and Figueiredo. He gets dropped for the first time, I think, in his career. We saw Marlon Chito Vera hit the deck, right? So whenever you see that, is that a sign that things are starting to head in the wrong direction? Is this a sign that we're kind of coming to the end of Marlon Chito Vera? I don't know if I would go that far just yet, but what he has in front of him is a very, very tough challenge here in Mario Bautista, a young guy on the rise in the division who has a very well-rounded skill set. I know that the majority of the time we see Mario Bautista, he's on the feet, he's got a powerful overhand right, and he does have takedowns in his back pocket. He does have solid submissions, but he really didn't do himself any favors in his most recent fight against Jose Aldo, because after that fight, he was public enemy number 1. Like, people were going online like, I hate Mario Bautista. He's my least favorite fighter in the UFC. And there was a point in time to where everyone was coming after Mario Bautista. Like, he had the whole MMA world pissed off because of how he pushed Aldo up against the fence, made it a very, very boring fight, and did essentially nothing for 15 minutes, right? So that is where a lot of the criticism is coming from. So I think that we're going to see a Mario that's looking for a bounce back performance, a guy that is going to come in here with a point to prove because he's got a big name in front of him here in Marlon Vera. And I think that if Mario comes into this and he mixes in the grappling and he decides to take Chito down, I think that will be his easiest path to victory, because unfortunately what we have seen with Chito is if you can out-wrestle him and you can take him down and control him, he doesn't do the best job at getting back to his feet, and he struggles when guys are on top of him, controlling him with the grappling. However, Marlon does have solid submissions. I know it's been a little while since we've seen one, so I do see scenarios to where Mario may be a little bit hesitant to entertain the grappling if Chito, who I would expect, is expecting to come into this fight and, be expecting Mario to try and take him down, right? So hopefully he's working on some different submissions and different ways that he can take advantage of Mario if he comes in with a wrestle-heavy game plan. But if this plays out on the feed, I actually think Marlon has a very good shot at winning this fight. I think that I would favor Mario Bautista at this point, considering what we've seen from him. I mean, the dude is showing that he has a very, very high-level skill set. He is someone that can really be at the top of the bantamweight division, and he is hitting his stride to where Chito Vera, it seems like he's kind of fighting to still stay at the top of the division. But in terms of the striking, I think Marlon's better. I think that he has more weapons. He's got good front kicks up the middle. He's got a diverse kicking arsenal. He's got good knees, good elbows, and he does have some solid boxing. But the problem that we have seen with Chito throughout his career is, especially in a 15-minute fight, it does not favor him. It does not favor him at all. Now, sometimes it does because he's eventually able to find a finish, but most of the time he's getting outscored, right? He almost always loses the first round, comes out in the second round. Sometimes, he's on his bike a little bit more in terms of, foot on the gas. Like we saw that against Figgy, actually, right? Because that was one of those rare times that we saw a Chito with urgency, a guy that was coming out there trying to actually make something happen early on. And it just wasn't enough, right? Because Figueiredo is speedy, he's fast, he's, going from flyweight up to bantamweight, so he had a little bit of a speed advantage. And that is one of the biggest problems with Chito, is he's a slow starter, and he is very, very slow for the bantamweight division. He's a stout guy. I do think that he is, physically strong. His kicks are very, very powerful. But if he cannot stop the takedowns of Mario, he does not win this fight. He does not win this fight. And even on the feet, Mario has solid power, and his striking is improving, and it is getting better with time. I lean towards Mario Bautista in this fight. I would love to see Chito Vera get it done because I'm a big Chito Vera fan. I like watching him fight. I think he's very, very fun. But from what we've seen so far over the course of 15 minutes, if he's getting taken down, he's probably going to get controlled. And on the feet, is he going to throw enough output and be aggressive enough early on to get ahead on the judges' scorecards over Mario? That's the question. And what we've seen from Chito, I just don't know if we can trust it, thus far. And who's to say that Mario just doesn't hold him up against the fence and make it another boring fight, right? So I don't think that happens. But I do see a scenario in which Mario takes him down, controls him, and just makes this a boring fight. Or on the feet, Chito doesn't throw enough and ends up getting outscored on the judges' scorecards. Either way, this is an interesting fight here, because if Chito Vera can go out there and get a win over a surging contender and prospect in the division in Mario Bautista, he puts himself right back into the mix to, not a title shot right away, obviously, but he can put himself right back in the conversation for another big matchup, maybe somebody ahead of him in the rankings. So big fight for Chito Vera, kind of one of those crossroads fights, because he's coming off a loss to, O'Malley, coming off a loss, Davis and Figueiredo. We're going to find out kind of where Chito is at in his career at this point. But you can never sleep on the power and the kicks of Chito Vera. He can shut your lights out with a front kick or whatever it might be. But I still lean towards Mario in this fight. I think it's a hard fight for Chito Vera. Okay, the co-main event between Reiner De Ridder and Bo Nickal. This is a very, very interesting fight. This is a very interesting fight, and I'm happy the UFC went ahead and booked something like this for Bo, right? Because with Bo Nickal, he had a lot of hype coming into the UFC. Had very, very few professional fights. He went on the Contender Series. He steamrolled through the first guy. And they basically brought him back again because Dana's like, you have no experience. You're so green. Let's get you a little bit more cage time. And goes out there and finishes the job again. So then the UFC's like, okay, we can't bring you back for, a third fight here on the Contender Series? So they're like, all right, we'll give you the contract. We'll bring you in. And there's only so much of a slow build that you could do when the expectations are going to be sky high, because Bo Nickal has an outstanding collegiate wrestling background. He is about as high level of an American wrestler as you are going to find. Coming from the NCAA over into MMA, it doesn't get much better than Bo Nickal. He has outstanding wrestling, without question. But what we've seen in MMA is it's a little bit different. It's just a fact. It's just a little bit different. And what we've seen from Bo Nickal thus far, they've kind of given him cans, right? They gave him Val Woodburn at the last minute, goes out there and KOs him with a nasty overhand. That showed us, okay, Bo Nickal's got some power, man. Bo Nickal's got some power. He's not the cleanest, prettiest striker out there, but that's impressive to go out there and show us that he does have power and get a KO. I know Val Woodburn's not particularly good and not at UFC caliber, but I'm saying to go out there and get a KO when we were all kind of expecting Bo to just go out there and grapple people and find submissions, I think a lot of people were kind of surprised, right? But then we saw the Cody Brundage fight to where it was like he struggled with Brundage early, but people kind of shit all over Cody Brundage, and look what he was just able to do against Julian Marquez, right? So I don't think that Cody Brundage is this complete scrub like people always kind of want to talk about. but he does have a wrestling background, right? So it wasn't going to be necessarily the easiest fight for Bo Nickal. I expected it to not be as difficult as it was early, but Bo eventually went in, was able to find, the finish and was able to eventually get Brundage out of there. It's just the expectations of Bo are so high. That is what we had seen thus far. And the biggest problem with Bo Nickal, right, is he talks so much and he's talking about Khamzat Chimaev and what he would do to him and this and that. He's not doing shit to Khamzat Chimaev. Khamzat Chimaev would knock out Bo Nickal. He might even submit him. I mean, I would love to see that fight at some point down the line if Bo Nickal can make it to the top of the middleweight division. But all he kept doing was talking about Khamzat Chimaev. Then he got mad when people were saying he's not ready for Chimaev. And so it's like Bo Nickal just basically became this whiny baby who was like listening to all the noise, right? So I think that a lot of it was kind of new to Bo, to where it's like, hey, I'm not used to being criticized so much. I was Mr. Dominant Wrestler, and now I'm in the UFC. Everything was smooth sailing. I'm over an American Top Team, and now I got all these haters. I got all these people being so negative, to where he finds himself in a position against Paul Craig to where the criticism got even louder, right? Because he goes out there against Paul, and it wasn't a pretty fight. It wasn't a pretty fight. And the biggest concern that I have for Bo about that is, yes, Paul Craig does have outstanding jiu-jitsu. He has a very dangerous guard, and he's not someone that you want to be messing around on the ground with, because you could be dominating the whole fight, just like Ankalaev was to Paul Craig. But at the last second, Ankalaev got subbed, and that is the guard and the jiu-jitsu presence that Paul brings to the table. So I do think that there was a little bit of a fear factor there for Bo Nickal, but it's concerning to me when you have a dominant wrestling base and you go into a fight with Paul Craig and you don't do what you're good at, right? Bo Nickal is not a good striker at all. His striking is something that it's got leaps and bounds before he's going to be able to go in there with some of the top guys in the division. I mean, hell, this fight right here, I'm concerned against Reiner De Ridder because De Ridder's a better striker. He absolutely is a better striker here than Bo Nickal. But in terms of all of the ranked opposition in the middleweight division, because they've already kind of built Bo to this point, he's already a big name. He's someone the UFC is clearly looking to push. How do you get the fans back on the side of Bo Nickal? Because a lot of people have kind of abandoned ship on Bo Nickal, right? Let's just be honest. That's kind of what happened. And they give him an opponent in Reiner De Ridder, who's coming off of back-to-back wins over Gerald Meerschaert and Kevin Holland since coming into the UFC. And he is a very, very dangerous submission artist, right? A guy that is coming over from one, and he comes into the UFC, and to go out there and do that to Kevin Holland in the first round, I know people don't think very highly of Kevin Holland at this point. That's still impressive. The only other guy to go out there and completely roll over Kevin Holland was Khamzat Chimaev, right? You saw Reiner De Ridder get to the single leg, dump him on his back, and just dominate him. And he is a big guy in the middleweight division. And in terms of this fight here, I worry for Bo, man. I don't know that Bo wins this fight. I really don't know if he wins this fight, because I think that this is going to come down to a kickboxing fight. Because in terms of the grappling, Bo Nickal does have a decent submission game that is starting to develop. He's shown that in the UFC. He does have solid submissions. He's training at American Top Team, and he is a guy that is starting to really excel when it comes to the overall grappling. But the fact that he went in there against Paul Craig and didn't even try to grapple and do what he is good at, it's weird to me, man. Like, why didn't you try to grapple Paul Craig? I know he's got a dangerous guard, but he's old. Paul Craig's not like a top tier guy in middleweight or light heavyweight anymore. He should have went right after him, took his ass down, and tried to find a finish immediately. That's what Bo should have done. Instead, he got into a back and forth kickboxing fight on the feet to where it just looks big ooga booga shots, big winging left hands over the top, and it just doesn't look pretty. He's going in there against a seasoned, like in his prime, dangerous submission ace in RDR, man. And I just don't know, like, this is a winnable fight for Bo Nickal. I just don't think he can do it. I don't think he can do it. Maybe as we get closer to the fight, I have a little bit of a change in my mindset here. But what's Bo going to do? What's he going to take him down and control him for 15 minutes? I mean, maybe, because we saw Gerald Meerschaert, put RDR on his back and control him a little bit. But that's, so if Gerald's doing that, well, I would imagine that Bo Nickal would be able to take RDR down. But maybe, feinting some level changes, throwing some big shots over the top. Maybe Bo's able to catch him with a shot, because we've seen he has power. But in terms of the more polished guy on the feet, it has to be RDR. From what we've seen thus far, unless Bo Nickal, since UFC, 309 has made some crazy strides, he just seems like he is even behind on the feet compared to RDR. And I know that RDR made Gerald Meerschaert look like a world-class kickboxer out there, but he's still a better striker than Bo Nickal. He throws decent kicks. He's got some decent, he's got good straight shots. Doesn't have a ton of power. But I think if they get tangled up in the grappling, I do think that could be dangerous for Bo, because we have seen that RDR, he's got good submissions everywhere, right? Up against the fence, he can take you down. He has decent wrestling of his own. He's not as good of a wrestler as Bo Nickal. We all know that. But in terms of MMA grappling, is Bo Nickal better than RDR? Like if they had a straight flow grappling matchup to where it's basically, straight wrestling with submissions, who wins? I don't know, right? I mean, maybe you could say Bo Nickal, but the fact that we add in the striking, the element of the cage and all these different factors, and considering what we've seen from Bo, I just think this is a hard fight. And, if Bo could go out there and he could beat RDR, especially find a finish, he will, I think, get the fans kind of back on his side. But he'll probably go out there and say something stupid as hell on the microphone and piss everybody off. And it seems like when the UFC is trying to give him a layup, he just misses. He absolutely just banks it off the backboard, misses the rim and the net completely. Like, that seems like Bo, he just can't take the assist from the UFC right now. So Bo Nickal can't get out of his own way, and this is a very winnable fight for him compared to the other ranked opposition in the division. This is a hard fight, man. This is a hard fight because I don't think RDR is a world beater, but he does have very, very high level submission ability. I think that he is better on the feet compared to Bo Nickal, because even if Bo does come in there and have more power, it's not very technical. It's nothing that De Ridder hasn't seen. But in terms of the wrestling that Bo Nickal presents, if he comes in and sticks to his guns of who he actually is in terms of being the wrestler, combining submissions, mixing in some ground and pound, I could see Bo Nickal getting it done. But at this point, I don't think I've seen enough to say that Bo Nickal beats RDR, man. Just from what we've seen from RDR, this guy's got a wealth of experience. He was a champion over and won, and I'm always hesitant, right? Whenever you come into the UFC, you make your debut, I like to see a little bit first before I get kind of confident in your ability. RDR seems like he's a problem in this division for anybody when it comes, or for most, when it comes to the grappling. I don't think Bo beats him. Where my head is at right now, I think RDR is able to get this one done. But if Bo Nickal wins this fight, like I said, it would do him wonders, because this is a big step up in competition from some of the guys that he's been facing. This isn't a washed up Paul Craig. This isn't a Val Woodburn who shouldn't be in the UFC. This isn't Jamie Pickett here. This isn't Cody Brundage. This is a solid high level submission guy in RDR who is still decently polished in all aspects of MMA. I think De Ridder actually wins this fight. Okay, main event. We have Cory Sandhagen versus Deiveson Figueiredo. Look, this is a fun matchup in terms of the fact that it's going to be one of those fights where you pull out your notepad, you're writing about the techniques, you're writing about the distance management, some of the scrambles, some of the exchanges, and the high level this and that. I don't think this is a very entertaining fight. I think that both of these fighters are world class. They're top of the weight class, but they aren't champions in the bantamweight division, because I know Figueiredo was a champion down at flyweight, so I'm not going to say that he's not championship caliber. But at bantamweight, some of the top guys in the division he won't beat, right? He went out there and he got, basically Petr Yan put on a master class against Deiveson Figueiredo. So if you can't get through Yan, you're not beating the guys in the top of the division. You're not beating Umar Nurmagomedov. You're not beating Merab. I don't even think that either of these guys beat O'Malley. I think O'Malley beats Figgy. I think that O'Malley would beat Sandhagen, even though it's a little bit of a tricky fight. But this fight right here, it's just like a tactical chess match type of fight, because Cory Sandhagen, I think he's going to be significantly bigger than Figgy in there. He's tall, he's rangy, doesn't have a ton of power in his hands, but he's a very diverse and versatile fighter, right? Cory Sandhagen can mix up the stances. He's got decent grappling of his own. He's got good submissions. He's just basically very well-rounded and pretty good everywhere, right? It's not like Cory Sandhagen completely stands out in one specific area. He's really improved the grappling as well, offensively and defensively. we saw that against Umar Nurmagomedov, the way he was able to stop those takedowns, the way that he was able to get back to the feet and do a lot of good things in that fight. He just didn't let his hands go, right? I think that he was kind of behind the striking of Umar Nurmagomedov, and Umar is about as good as it gets in the bantamweight division. In my opinion, him and Merab are clearly the two best guys in the division, right? So I still think very highly of Sean O'Malley. I think that it's going to, depend on the perfect matchup for him at this point. Maybe he's able to beat those guys. I don't think he does. But you get my point. Cory Sandhagen's well-rounded. He has good striking, but what we've seen from him is snooze fest after snooze fest for the most part, right? Umar Nurmagomedov was a guy that could not allow Cory to just take him down and lay on him the whole time, and that's what we saw from Cory. He was headlining these fight night main events, laying on Chito Vera for 25 minutes, laying on Rob Font for 25 minutes, and that kind of dampened the stock a little bit of Cory, and he finds himself in a position against Deiveson Figueiredo, who was looking spectacular since coming up to bantamweight. He ran through Rob Font, ran through Cody Garbrandt, ran through Chito Vera, and then he met Petr Yan, who is one of the best mixed martial artists that we've really ever seen. I think Petr Yan is about as good as it gets in terms of just overall skill set, super technical, very good everywhere, and Figueiredo just got kind of, poked around. He got, picked apart. He got everywhere the fight went. Petr Yan seemed to have the advantage. So in this fight here, I don't really know. I just think that we see a very tactical back and forth. I think Cory Sandhagen on the feet, I do think that he is better than Deiveson Figueiredo. He switches stances, he's got the leg kicks, and the way that he mixes things up and controls the distance, I think is going to be a problem for Deiveson Figueiredo. However, I believe that Figgy has more power in his hands. So if he is able to land clean on Cory Sandhagen, I could see him potentially hurting Cory Sandhagen. I don't think he knocks him out, because what we've seen from Sandhagen is he has a very underrated chin. He's very durable. And maybe Figgy could take him down and pull off a submission. Don't think that's very likely, because Sandhagen's very scrambly, very wiry on the ground. I think that we are looking at a 25-minute fight here where Cory Sandhagen is able to win a decision. Like I said, I don't think that this is a banger fight. I don't think that it's a horrible fight. I just think that this is one of those where it's like a technical back and forth, you go, I go, strategy, game plan. Like, that's the type of fight that we're looking at here. And if it gets to the grappling, Figueiredo is very good there. We've seen that. He's got good submissions. He has good takedowns of his own, and his speed could be a little bit of an issue for Cory Sandhagen if it gets to that point. But either way, I think that this is a solid fight. But if you guys enjoyed this video, please give it a like. Let me know what you think down in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you do not miss an upload. I would appreciate it. See you next time.